When you start treating a political party like a property, you treated RJD like a property, and then Laluji transferred it to Tejashwi, saying you are the sole kind of owner of my property right now. And all the active politicians in the family, Misa Bharti, Tej Pratap Yadav, and lately their other daughter also, Rohini. So of course they will feel bad about the fact that there's one person who's taking all decisions, who's deciding everything. The party belongs to him essentially. What was happening 4 months before the elections? Rahul Gandhi came up with a voter Acharya. Rahul Gandhi seemed so obsessed with it, he did not even raise three most pertinent issues. And by the time, and if you see, the seat sharing did not happen, Rahul Gandhi went on a foreign tour, the seat sharing collapsed. Tejashwi was at home for 15 days, he did not campaign.
Hello and welcome to the Statesman Talk. I'm Ananya Dasgupta. On this episode, we are joined by Mrityunjay Sharma, author, entrepreneur, and politician from the BJP. Thank you very much for joining us on the Statesman.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's talk about the one issue that's dominating headlines ever since the Bihar election results were out, and that's the RJD Family Feud. What's your take on this very public outburst that's happened?
See, what happens is when you start treating a political party like a property, right? You essentially what you are doing is you treated RJD like a property, and then Laluji transferred it to Tejashwi, saying you are the sole kind of owner of my property right now. And then it is very sure to create these tensions among so-called the other suitors of that property, right? And all the active politicians in the family, Misa Bharti, Tej Pratap Yadav, and lately their other daughter also, Rohini. So of course they will feel bad about the fact that there's one person who's taking all decisions, who's deciding everything, who's the face, like the party belongs to him essentially. Also what happens is now, since the party is completely owned by Tejashwi, there are other advisors to him who are very close to him supposedly. Rohini has named some of them in fact. And so it becomes very apparent that, they feel sidelined. They feel like, outsiders are actually giving advice to Tejashwi and he's actually, paying heed to them. But for us, he's like completely ignoring us. And especially when such a debacle happens, right? Tough times. So I think it was coming for him. It was coming for him. Also, as an individual, I think Tejashwi still, I would say, is to be able to grow that mature to take everybody along. What he has essentially tried to do is, he has tried to eliminate any future competition that may spring up from within the family. So first, even if you see Tej Pratap's ouster, that was completely driven by Tejashwi. Lal Prashad on his own would not have done it. So Tejashwi would have influenced him to do it because he sees that he may be a trouble in the future, right? Same for a Misa Bharti, same for a Rohini Acharya. So I think this was very, very coming. Nothing very new about it.
But daughters leaving home, whispers of a new boss. Is this the end of the Lalu-Rabri era, or do you see this only as a bump?
Again, so there have been instances in the past also. If you see the entire case of Acharya, who was Tej Pratap's wife, and how murky did it get, right? I won't say it's the end of the RJD because there are a lot of political parties which keep surviving, it's a sine curve in terms of they go upwards and then go downwards. But I very certainly feel that it will not be such a potent force as it was in the 1990s in Bihar. Because if you see, people have also grown out of those narratives of social revolution and, social revolution cannot be, or social justice cannot be an answer to everything in the world, to bread, to roads, to electricity and everything, right? And so they'll have to build a new narrative, a newer social coalition, bring in other players also. It cannot constrain itself to two communities of Muslims and Yadavs and keep saying that we want to be in power. I don't think that's possible anymore. And that would take Tejashwi a lot of effort if he wants to bring in some other castes, some other groups also in that coalition. So very tough task.
So as a BJP insider, do you see this weakening the opposition in Bihar, this particular episode?
See, somebody will take that space, See, what happens when one party or one group in an opposition weakens, somebody else takes up that space. It will happen in Bihar as well. So either Tejashwi or RJD, let's say, they reinvent themselves in terms of trying to be a much broader party. Or let's say smaller parties, experimental parties, caste-based groups, they'll keep springing up in parts. So for example, till 2 elections ago, AIMIM had no presence in Bihar. They now have a very significant presence, right? So they are occupying that Muslim space. let's say very newer parties, like there's a person called IP Gupta, who was a part of the Mahagathbandhan as well. He was given 3 seats. He has sprung up as a new party. Mukesh Sahni sprung as a new party of the Mallas. There will be people who will try to fill that vacant space if they weaken up.
And what is your take on Tejashwi's attempt to connect with the youth?
See, the problem is, and I think this is a problem across spectrum of people who are second generation politicians. Since it comes so easy to them, right? And the families don't make an effort for them to learn those experiences the hard way, right? So you come into politics, you directly become the, Karyakari Adhyaksh of the party. You directly become an MLA and then deputy CM. You have not gone out of your house to even understand how people live in a village in Bihar, right? You have not spent a day with them. You'll never be able to understand those problems as Lalu would have understood, just because you came from that background, right?
So you rise up the ranks.
You rise up the ranks because, see, until you've experienced something, you cannot solve it, for sure. Until you have not gone to a government school, you would never know what it feels like to study in a government school. Unless you have gone to a dispensary, you will never know what it feels like to go to a dispensary. If you've always visited the Maxis and Medantas, you would not know what's the health problem in India's life. And that's the problem with Tejashwi. And hence, when he speaks on a lot of things, so even when he spoke out and said we would give one government job to each family in Bihar, everybody laughed at him. He thought it would be a masterstroke, right? Because people understand it's such a joke. And if he had those experiences, he would not have spoken of, a government job to everybody in Bihar.
So this 15 years of anti-incumbency against RJDs, do you really think that is still valid even today?
That's very much valid. If you go out on the field in Bihar, see, if you ask people as to they would want a government which is slightly inefficient, okay, you always have expectations with a certain government. So they may say that Nitish government could have done more in terms of jobs, in terms of migration and so on. But when they compare it with the 15 years rule of Lalu Prasad Yadav, they say we would not have that rule come what may. Whatever inefficiency be in this government, will still prefer it much more than that rule. Right? And hence, because safety comes first, your life comes first, right? You cannot compromise with those basic things, your freedom, the freedom to go out, the freedom to move in, the freedom to practice a job, right? You will have jobs and you will flourish only when you survive, right? If somebody is striking at the survival itself, they'll never prefer it.
But those memories are still fresh, and even for, say, the younger generation.
What happens is, so there may be a section of people who would not have seen that firsthand. But stories get passed on. It did happen this time as well, right? For the last 1 year, if you see the narrative in media, there were stories strewn all over. People would talk about Shilpi Gautam murder case. They would talk about Champa Vishwas. They would talk about Lalu's daughter's wedding, Sadhu Yadav and all those things. So the stories get passed on. And the older generation do tell them that this is a privilege that you are enjoying, wherein you're freely roaming at night, right? They tell them of the Naxalite attacks that used to happen in villages. So I think when the scar is so deep, so for example, what happened in Kashmir, do you think people will forget so easily, even 50 years down the line? No. I think what happened in Bihar was even worse in every parameter. I don't think it will be forgotten any easily by people, even down the generations.
Interesting insights. Let's talk about the winners now. One thing is to win an election and the other is to sweep an election. Your take on why the NDA swept this election?
I think it is a combination of a lot of factors, right? I cannot attribute it to just one factor. So the first would be a comparison between the two rules itself, as we spoke about. So any given day, people would prefer Nitish as a chief minister over RJD's chief minister, apparently Tejashwi. Second, also, I think the way the entire coalitions happened and the fought elections, there's a stark difference. You see India, the way they formed an alliance, they got to a seat arrangement. All 5 leaders of the 5 parties tweeted at the same time, exactly same tweet. That this is the, sheet sharing. That shows discipline. Even whatever differences there were, people were, in every possible way, permutations, combinations, they'll brought in, right? That was NDA. Contrast this with Mahagathbandhan. They got a sheet sharing done 3 days after all the nominations were over. There were 10 seats on which they were fighting between themselves. Right. Similarly, if you go about, the issues of the elections, see, the issues of any election get formed at least 4 to 6 months before the elections, right? And then you keep hammering it among the people. What was happening 4 months before the elections? Rahul Gandhi came up with a voter adhikar yatra. If you go on the field in Bihar, you would not be able to find one person who would be affected by it.
And this is your personal experience?
Personal experience. I could not find one person who would tell me that my vote has been deleted from the voter rolls. I did not find one person. And this is the experience of so many journalists and people and politicians on Bihar. So he did a yatra wherein the crowd was there because all his karyakartas and paraphernalia and money was pumped in. So it looked like, oh my God, this is such a protest and revolution. But nobody on the ground connected with it. And what happened because of this? The issues which actually could have struck a chord with the people, a migration, a joblessness, even law and order, they did not even raise it. Somebody else, Prashant Kishor,
So
was
the
raising
entire
it.
focus was on quote-unquote vote chori.
Exactly. In fact, his other coalition partners, they were not comfortable with it. But Rahul Gandhi seemed so obsessed with it, he did not even raise the most pertinent issues. And by the time, and if you see, the seat sharing did not happen. Rahul Gandhi went on a foreign tour. The seat sharing collapsed. Tejashwi was at home for 15 days. He did not campaign. After he appeared for the Rouse, when you quote, he went home and I was at home for 15 days. People were asking, where is Tejashwi?
Where is Tejashwi? Yes.
Until he was declared the CM candidate, he did not go out. And then look at what happened in that press conference as well. Just before the press conference, Mukesh Sahni was adamant, if I'm not declared deputy CM, I'm not going to press conference. Another dilemma. He had to be declared deputy CM under pressure. And there they thought, I will play the card of a EBC saying, we are projecting him as a deputy CM. But it backfired. The Muslims became angry. They said, you are projecting him as a deputy CM. What about us? The 80% of us. It backfired. So throughout the election, if I see, right, the way elections are fought, in fact, and you would know this, Amit Shah stayed in Patna for 5 days, met every possible person who was disgruntled or had filed nominations, as a rebel candidate. Almost 90-95% of those candidates were, assuaged and made to sit. So it's
so the leadership was there on the ground.
It is at every juncture you see.
Regarding the women voters, because they are saying that the women voters swung this election, was it the 10,000 rupee promise only, or was it also the fact that there were bicycles and women's reservations as well?
It was. See, that's a very lazy analysis to say. If it was just about those 10,000, Tejashwi promised 30,000 as soon as he came to power. That should have swayed them more. It is also about credibility as to who's saying what and who's doing what, right? Nitish has built a credibility with women voters over the last 20 years. You should see that. Shaikil Posak, he was the first person in the country to institute 50% reservation for women in panchayats. Today, half the representatives in local bodies in Bihar are women. Nowhere else in the country. He instituted 35% reservation for women in government jobs. In constabulary, in police, if you go to Patna today, you would see women police officers everywhere. You would not see that anywhere in the country, right? Even a controversial issue such as prohibition, studies show that it has reduced domestic violence. And who's the beneficiary? The women. So across, if you keep seeing women, he has struck such a chord with them that those women, in fact, those who were in school in 2007 and 8, those are mothers now.
Yeah.
Right? And so they have struck such a chord that they say, this person is there who's been working for us for 20 years, not just now, Jivika Didis. Right? And hence 10,000, I think, would be just a kind of a hammering, a reiteration of the same thing. And they trust him.
You're talking about Nitish Kumar building the credibility. In fact, a friend of mine was covering the Bihar elections, and before the results, I had asked her what her take was. And she said, the one thing I found was nobody was upset with Nitish Kumar. Yeah. His image was intact. What is it that has, helped him sway the voters and kept him in power for so long that they're back voting him in again? There's no anti-incumbency way.
No. Because see, again, the character of a person, you can see through it over 20 years of their rule, right? You understand what they stand for and what they don't, in spite of whatever they speak. So by the end of Lalu rule, people knew what he stands for, in spite of whatever else he may speak for. Over the last 20 years, Nitish had a very principled stand on things. He was the first person. The OBC-EBC bifurcation, which Lalu did not do for 15 years, he did it as soon as he came to power. And hence EBCs vote for him, right? It is not because Nitish does not come from the EBC section. And so they're indebted to him because, they see it as a real empowerment. All the things which Nitish did, in fact, for law and order, even though you criticize him, every time, in fact, in the first tenure, if you remember, when Nitish set up fast-track courts for, MP MLAs. So the first concern was that he would only, try and convict leaders of the opposition parties. But when you see a Shahabuddin going to jail for that, you also see Anand Mohan going to jail for that. A Prabhunath Singh who was with him for going to jail for that. So across party lines, he sent people to jail. He said, I'll not get into the way of law and order. So people see that, he stands for what he speaks. And that has been across. I spoke about women, speak about law and order, speak about his personal probity. Somebody who's been in Bihar for 20 years as a chief minister, not a speck of dust on him in terms of corruption, unimaginable. They have seen Lalu Yadav, they have seen Jagannath Mishra, they have seen so many chief ministers who are neck deep in corruption. So people say, he's a man beyond doubt.
We're talking about the prominent personalities of Bihar during this election. And of course, one of the most prominent personality was Prashant Kishor. What do you think happened to him?
I think he was in a hurry. And I think it's good that new people come into politics, good people come into politics, they have ideas. But you can't speed up a process of coming into politics just with the help of money. You can't create a movement with the help of money. It has to be organic. You have to go to the people, connect with them, bring them together, stand up for something, keep fighting for them. What he did was he corporatized the entire thing, I think, right? So
he's a phenomenon created by TV channels?
I know for a fact that, I know all the people who are on his rolls, actually. I know for a fact that people who traveled with him in Padyatra were on his rolls. I know, people who took care of his media, social media campaign. Everybody was on his rolls. If in a political party, you cannot have 100 karyakartas who are with you just for your ideology, I don't think you have created an organization.
So he didn't really have that mass following.
That's what I'm saying. If you go out in the villages in Bihar and talk about him, some people may have known him, but nobody was watching for him. He was an urban creation, a creation of people who have never been. So my friends in Bombay and Delhi would speak about him saying, oh, Prashant Kishor is doing very good. I think he would come into power in Bihar. And I would just smile. Because those people see social media and they don't see those leaders in Bihar who don't come on social media. So they think Prashant Kishor is the biggest politician in Bihar. But that's not the case on ground.
I'm quite interested in knowing from you, given that you're also an entrepreneur and author, what this election result means for business and infrastructure growth in Bihar over the next 5 years or so.
See, something that people fail to realize is, and I often have debates on this, they say Bihar should have done more in terms of jobs and migration and all of those. People don't understand where is Bihar coming from. Okay, the condition in 2005, people who have not been there, who have not been very deeply associated with it, they cannot imagine, I would say. Imagination would be difficult for them, what we have felt in Bihar. So when people say, what is the big deal if somebody just is roaming out on Marine Drive at 11 p.m. in the night? They don't understand what is the big deal, right? It is a big deal in Bihar. It is extremely big deal. For women to roam freely and to go to jobs in Bihar is a big deal. You cannot,
so the starting line was not the same.
Exactly. Having said that, I'm not saying they could have not done more. Of course, the more the better, right? But what I also say is you should judge governments on their direction at least, the intent at least. You can criticize them on the extent, but judge on the intent. So when you compare a Nitish government with a, erstwhile governments, even if you see the campaign, they were talking about jobs. In the last 1 year, I would have heard of at least 5-6 industrial centers in Bihar. There are small factories. I know for Aditya Birla factory that came up in Begusarai. I know of a semiconductor park, which is a plant around Patna near Jahanabad. So at least they're talking about it. So even during the election campaign, if you see the incident that happened in Mokama, Anand Singh and Durachand Yadav, he was apprehended in between elections. So I'm saying law and order, they're not compromising on it, right? So that speaks volumes about the very fact that the intention is there, right? And having said that, I think, next 5 years, I would very keenly watch, because one thing that has happened well in this election is there was a lot of discussion on jobs and migration and so on. So it would be good. I think this government will be pushed to, work on this. That's a very good thing that has happened, actually.
In the end, what's your take, or what do you think is the one lesson that any politician can take away from Bihar election results 2025?
A difficult one, but I would say content, genuinity, those things matter. You cannot befool voters, I would say. That's the one takeaway. Because from both the sides, if you see the RJD spoke about a lot of things, those jobs for every family, 30,000 rupees for every woman. They spoke about law and order. But then when he went to Siwan, he raised the slogans of Shahabuddin Ji Jindabad. People see through that. So they don't believe it just because you have a very lofty promise in your manifesto. On the other hand, with Prashant Kishor as well. Prashant Kishor spoke about all the right things, right? But he questioned leaders on their educational qualifications, the corruption and so on. But then when he was questioned on education, he ran away from an interview. Again, people see through it. So I'm saying, and politics is such a thing wherein you get so exposed, right? It's such a public life. You cannot hide your true self for very long, right? So the actual content, the actual genuinity, it will come out. And sooner or later, people will evaluate you on that. So I think it's a long haul, but if you are really passionate about it, very genuine about your content and what you want to do, people will appreciate it sooner or later.
Interesting talking to you. Thanks very much for joining us on the Statesman Talk.
Thank you so much.
That's it then of this episode of the Statesman Talk. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and post your comments on what you thought of this episode. We come to you from the Statesman, which is one of India's oldest English newspapers.